Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Shogun episode 3. It's called Tomorrow is Tomorrow. So spoilers for the episode as always. And I quite like this episode. I think this is the strongest of the three so far. And I think a big part of that comes from the fact that we've gotten all of the groundwork out the way and now we're getting to just actually have characters go on the journey and bond a little bit. This episode developed the relationship a little bit between Blackthorn and Mariko. It developed it with Toranaga in Blackthorn. Those little hints that there was maybe some respect for me in last episode kind of flourished a little bit again by the end of this one. Even Yubashigi's stuff, and I'm probably butchering his name. I'm still not really quite sure how to pronounce his name, but his stuff, he's got some interesting moments here where it seems like where he's loyal to and who's aware of how corrupt his loyalty is sort of still up in the air, and that's playing throughout the episode. Yeah, and I think that's when one had some big set piece moments as well that felt really nice visually, especially for a TV perspective. There's some stuff in the boats that I wouldn't think twice about it being a movie, but in a TV show and like a season of TV and looking as pretty good as it does is surprising. I have very few complaints really, and there's still some ancillary characters that are still hard to keep track of, just because there's so many, and we're dealing with so many different names and things like that. But all of these central characters are really starting to click together, I felt, in this one. Even the sort of friendly rivalry between Blackthorn and Richard from Lost, what's his name, Rodriguez. Them shouting insults at each other when they were piloting different ships, you know, calling each other tits and whores and whatever else they were saying. You know, there was some amusement there that I enjoyed. So pretty much after the assassination of last episode, the plan is to move everyone's to potentially a safer place in Japan, and they need to take Blackthorn there, so they're going to leave, but there's obviously some attempts to stop this. In fact, that's what the entire episode's about. It's like various stages of this journey being interrupted by either Ishido and his men, or the Christian Japanese army, just trying to interrupt every single stage. It basically breaks down into three main parts, which is the actual leaving on the journey, which is a fun little segment in which they pull a little switcheroo, where they're trying to pretend that Toranaga is still staying here and he's not going with them. But they do that by having his wife be in the little carriage, but then swap out when the pregnant daughter, whoever it is, distracts them by feeling some pains, and we see a little switcheroo. And what's nice about this is that Blackthorn notices it and kind of like gets in on it, and then once again gets to kind of like earn a little bit of trust, because he kind of goes out of his way to protect the secret. Some of the men, when they're leaving the palace, stop them and say they have to inspect every passenger, like they're at the airport, pretty much. And they're like, no, Ishido just came by and checked everything. And, you know, Ishido was doing it under this guise of being a friend and wishing everyone a welcome journey and all that. But he's actually being, you know, nosy. He's making sure he can see who's there. This is all about what he wants and who he's actually after. We know that he's behind a lot of the shady stuff going on. Blackthorn kind of like jumps in and makes a bit of a scene to try and distract them from finding out that they've pulled this ruse, that Toranaga's actually with them in the little carriage, and just talks a lot of nonsense by and large to this guard who's trying to check everything. And it's even the rest of Toranaga's men don't know they're protecting this secret. Mariko explains, because she also noticed the switcheroo happen, that Toranaga's quite tactical. He's quite, you know, he's very good at doing like tricks and things to win battles or win, and this even is sort of like plays on what he's already been doing in the first two episodes by trying to disrupt the alliance of the other four lords so that he can get out of his predicament. Like he's very what's the word, resourceful, I guess. So him jumping in to try and protect this secret plan, when even Toranaga's own men are all rolling their eyes and thinking, why is this idiot barbarian? Because that's what they call him. They call him, I mean, other than, I can't remember the Japanese word they also use, but they call him barbarian a lot. I thought that was a nice little bit, because it felt like he was going out of his way to help, and which would further the trust a little bit. And then that leads to some further bonding with him and Mariko. He notices how Mariko's husband speaks to her, enough that he sort of gets that it's her husband, and kind of asks her about his family, about her son, who the husband also kind of yells at when the son's trying to get her to not go at the start. Basically, it opens up a dialogue where Blackthorn starts talking about the fact that he's got a son and a daughter and a family back home, and it feels that they're bonding a little bit. And it feels like, okay, these characters are actually starting to get to know each other, we're forming relationships, and it's not just all where they're starting. It feels like we're, you know, once they're going through the forest and they're attacked by all these flaming arrows, and it feels like, you know, Toranaga reveals that he's there, and Yubashige's kind of like, wait, for once I'd like to know what the plan is before you spring it, because he didn't know this was going on. And it's pretty clear that to Toranaga that Yubashige was kind of betraying him and working with Shishido here, but is still working with him anyway, and he's sort of doing something tactical by doing that. Toranaga's own son even questions, why are we still working with him? He was betraying us. It's kind of playing this idea that either he is just being, you know, he's keeping his enemies close so that he can use that in some way later down the line, or if you want to look at it maybe in a nicer way, maybe he just kind of like recognizes the people that he can see possible, if not redemption, then possibly he's seeing something there that we maybe aren't as an audience yet. And, you know, I kind of glossed over a lot of Yubashige's introduction in the last review. I was doing both episodes together, and I didn't even talk about two key things that happen with him. One is that he pissed on Blackthorn. I don't have anything to add, but he pissed on him. And two was the whole idea that he likes to watch people die slowly. There's a guy in like a sort of bubbling hot tub that's killing him, and he's sort of paying attention to the moment of death. And the prostitute who's supposed to be there for him sort of recognizes that he's into more watching and observing those moments. And, you know, people have often compared orgasms to death, so it's this idea that his servant, like his little henchman, ends up being seduced by the prostitute, and he just watches. And this wasn't something he asked for, but the prostitute kind of like predicted that he would like this, and she was right, because he's like, yes, continue, go on. So they've definitely set up a character in Yubashige, and I don't know where we're going with them quite yet, but it definitely felt interesting watching him sort of be along for this ride with all these others who, you know, by and large, it feels like these other characters, Toranaga, Blackthorn, and Mariko, and any of Toranaga's allies that seem to be on his side, like, they feel inherently a little bit more on the heroic side, where, well, I'm not saying that they're squeaky clean. You know, Blackthorn might have this history with piracy that's a big deal. Toranaga might do some things to win wars that are a bit shady, but by and large, it feels like these are the characters that we're kind of learning to root for, and they're forming these friendships. And part of what we're feeling, or at least what I was feeling throughout this episode, is, you know, much like Blackthorn causing a scene so that Toranaga's not discovered, them sticking their necks out for each other is kind of where some of the heart of the show seems to be coming from for me so far, which is these interesting and weird and completely new types of alliances and friendship. Because, you know, these are people who haven't interacted before. Like, there's been these individual people. I mean, on a cultural level, you know, Blackthorn is literally the first Protestant to ever, you know, land on Japan. So this idea that he's forming a friendship with Toranaga when Toranaga's having this like dispute with all these other lords, and, you know, there's still quite a bit of a tangled web of like all the things going on in the background. But I think this episode was a really good example of like the core focus of the episode being a really nice streamlined story that is influenced by all the things going on in the background, but it wasn't bogged down by all those details, because we could really just get into the meat of them on this journey and being attacked. And the fight scene in the forest is fun enough. It all leads to them running. Well, I should probably mention Blackthorn and Mariko get in the fight and help fight a little bit. So again, there's a little bit more sort of camaraderie building up with that. But when they get to the shore, because Toranaga's got a ship there, a galley, they get on all these rowboats to go to the ship. And I was actually surprised by this. I was not expecting this. I thought Mariko's husband would be around, because I'm suspecting that Mariko and Blackthorn will probably like form a romantic relationship. And I was thinking that Mariko's husband would be around as kind of an antagonist almost because of how he was treating her before, because it seems like this is a marriage that's unhealthy and that there's a reason. I mean, at the very least, that still applies. We understand why, on some level, she'll be able to move on because it wasn't a healthy marriage. There was this hold that he had on her, and she was being held down in a way that Blackthorn presumably might not. He might seem like this very different person. But I wasn't expecting him to die and have kind of a hero's death. And, well, I say that. He's not confirmed dead. I should probably say that. He might actually have been taken prisoner. Did he die at the end of this? I don't think he did. Because he has this big heroic moment where he stayed back to try and fend off all the Christians coming for Blackthorn. And he makes it to the docks when they're on the rowboats. And he has this whole moment where Blackthorn, and this, you know, makes us endear towards Blackthorn a little bit, is like, hey, there's still time, we can go back for him. But everyone's like, no, like, we have to just keep going. And Mariko's husband, like, sort of, like, just understands and bows at the edge of the pier, takes out his sword, turns around at all the men who are, like, you know, up above the stairs, and just gives it a war cry to be like, all right, come on then, bring it. And, you know, they all watch him from the boats as he sort of fights lots of men, and sort of have to leave him behind. And there's, like, you know, some sad music comes in. He gets kind of a hero's exit, at least for now. And I thought that was interesting because he has been kind of an unlikable character up until this point. And I suppose it at least says that, okay, for all the other faults he might have had, the idea that he was loyal to his lord, he was a good soldier, all these other things, that can be true. And the purpose that his relationship with Mariko served still works up until this point. I guess I just thought he was going to be more of an ongoing kind of antagonist to it. That said, though, if we find out he's not dead, 'cause I don't remember if we see a killing blow. I actually genuinely don't remember. But if he isn't dead and he's, like, held prisoner or something, and then they get to reunite later, that could present some dramatic things. Let me know in the comments if there was a killing blow, because I don't remember. I was too caught up in the emotion of all the pretty, you know, fire, because this is actually really nice when they were sailing away in the water. And it's all obviously just torches and stuff that they're holding that illuminate the scene. It was very pretty. This entire set piece section was very good. This next part of the episode, though, was also very intriguing. Because Blackthorn notices that there's all these little boats, and we see that it's all Christians with, like, flaming arrows and stuff waiting, and they're sort of barricading the shore. Because there's, like, a sort of narrow area where there's, like, rocks at the sides. So there's like a bit of the water they can kind of barricade. And like, crap, we can't get through that. They'll board us and they'll deal with it. But this is where the Portuguese ship comes in, the black ship, as they've been calling it, which was set up earlier that they want to leave, and the captain wants to just disobey the orders and just go anyway, which the priests don't want because that'll ruin the diplomacy and they won't be invited back and it'll break down relations with Japan. And we saw Toranaga refuse the authorization, that's the word I'm looking for, last episode. So they're like, hey, their ship's bigger, they can get through that blockade. So they sail on over, and Toranaga has a meeting with the priest and the captain, which basically boils down to making some deals, and he offers, like, silver stuff for the captain, and the captain's like, that's not enough. So he also offers that in his hometown of Edo in Japan, they can build a church. And the priests are very happy about this. But what Toranaga also wants in return for that is for them to convince the two lords that are Christian to, like, flip on Ishido and come over to his side. So he's playing the political game. And where it gets kind of, like, interesting from a character perspective is that they then say, okay, but the other condition we have then is that we get the Englishman, we get Blackthorn. They offer him some, like, the evidence from his ship, from Blackthorn's ship, that he was engaged in piracy, and they hand him these books, and then it seems like he's made this deal. Blackthorn's been left behind. I sort of misphrased that earlier when I said that they get him. It was more just that he has to stay in Osaka, knowing that that's a death trap for him, because everyone in Osaka, all these assassins, are technically there for him. They want to kill him. That's kind of what it's all about. So he's left behind on the galley ship, and they're going to sail away. And it's kind of like, you know, Mariko feels a little bit sad about it, and she's kind of like looking like, oh, I feel, you know, you can she doesn't say this out loud, but you can tell she feels kind of bad about abandoning him. And it does kind of feel like, as much as he's maybe earned a little bit of respect by Toranaga at this point, ultimately Toranaga, while he might have been reluctant, he made this deal so they could move on. And it's actually just this moment of sheer will that Blackthorn decides to start piloting the smaller ship, Toranaga's ship, kind of insist that they're going to follow the bigger ship out through the blockade. This again kind of endears him a little bit to the audience and certainly to the other characters, because both Toranaga and Mariko both kind of like smile a little bit here or there when they see him doing this. Mariko smiles and says he's a madman, but kind of in a way that she clearly likes that he's got the balls to do this. But he's, you know, because I think this was the ship in episode 2 that he was on when he was being transported as a prisoner that he ended up piloting because they needed a pilot. So he's built like a little bit of weird camaraderie with like the crew, and he gets them all sort of into it. Even after they get through the blockade, the captain on the black ship, he's like, hey, let's like make sure he can't get through. And he orders Rodriguez to sort of close him into the rocks so that he'll basically, they'll crash the ship and they'll be stranded there still. And this is actually a moment that pays off a little bit of this, again, this character building that I think is really the heart of the show. Rodriguez has been shouting over at him when they're both piloting the two ships, and it's kind of funny, but when he's given this order to effectively kill him by doing this, he kind of questions, you know, he just sort of stands there. He doesn't say it out loud that he questions it, but you can see that he's questioning it, and he's sort of not feeling comfortable with going through with that order, so he ultimately doesn't really sort of close in on him the way he's supposed to. He gives him enough room to get out, and he kind of just like dodges the question when the captain asks, like, why didn't you, you know, you've let him through? And he's like, oh no, I already had enough time, there's nothing we could have done. But in reality, he made a choice to give Blackthorn a chance to survive, and he kind of says, all right, that's us even. Because remember, back in episode 1, maybe it was 2, but you know, Blackthorn saved his life. Rodriguez was like in the water, he was stranded, and Blackthorn climbed down to get him. So he kind of owed him one, and that's how he feels here. He feels like he's repaid his debt. So at the very least, he has maybe a little bit of a moral code. Again, they're not squeaky clean characters, but there's something there. So I enjoyed all this, like all of this stuff on the ships, with the two ships being piloted separately, Blackthorn having the balls to try and do this when he's not supposed to, refusing to just let himself be stranded there to be killed by these murder squads. Ishido's at the shore with his army watching on because he wants him dead. Like, all of this is paying off, and it felt like a big sequence. It felt kind of pretty to look at, and it felt like some of the characters were starting coming together. The only real critique I would really give it is that once they get through this little set piece, Toranaga turns to the, you know, Mariko and says, inform the captain that now that we're through the blockade, we can just return to my ship. So they leave the black ship, they leave the Portuguese, and they go back to the smaller ship, and they're just with Blackthorn now. Like, it never really comes up that technically Blackthorn's gotten out of the predicament of his part of the deal. He's still with Toranaga. He's still with them, like, nothing, not that nothing happened, but like, it felt like you would think the captain and the Portuguese would still have some sort of like opinion in what happens to Blackthorn now, and it never really kind of addresses that. Maybe it'll do that in a future episode, I don't know, but that said though, I am happy they're together ultimately. The final sequences of the episode are basically Toranaga saying, hey, we've got this proof that you were a pirate, and that's kind of got a death sentence. And Mariko is translating all this, and he says, but that'll take a long time to translate. So we'll get to that. Almost as if he's going to intentionally either not do it or just let it sit there, because he actually wants to work with Blackthorn. He sees potential. It actually gives him a new title, because Barbarian isn't suitable anymore, because now he's effectively making him part of his crew. And he wants him to train a platoon of his troops, and like his tactics, like whatever like foreign skills, which Blackthorn's kind of admitting, right, to Mariko, right, before she translates, that he's not really, he's just a sailor. He doesn't really have a lot of combat skills necessarily. He's not like trained in that. But he sort of questions whether or not he should actually say that, and then says, you know what, just tell him it's an honor. Even if I'm making it up, it'll be an honor. It seems like that's what he wants, so I'll agree to it. Yeah, so it feels like he's been given this more prominent place. And I do wonder if, when those books are translated, will they actually prove he's a pirate? And I also wonder, did the Portuguese like alter them and doctor them? Because remember, in the first couple of episodes, they were saying, hey, there's stuff in here that's bad for us that we don't want them to see. So at the very least, I expect they have ripped out some pages. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they've put in some stuff and doctored some things to make him look even worse, because it's bad for them if Toranaga and everyone learns about what he knows about the Portuguese, like, and they understand that, you know, the Portuguese are benefiting from Japan not having a total understanding of the rest of the world and the conflicts that are going on, because it's benefiting them. So they don't want that to be interrupted. So all of that stuff is still kind of cool in the background. But for me, this episode was all about the character bondings and like the relationships forming. And the end of the episode is Toranaga wants to learn how to dive. It's the next morning. He's like, hey, show me how to dive. So we get like a montage of Blackthorn diving in over and over again because Toranaga wants to keep watching him do it so he can learn how to do it. And then he challenges him to a race. And Mariko says, don't let him win, because he hates that. And the episode ends with them diving in together to race to the shore, and Mariko smiles, and that's where it cuts the credits. And it feels like, yeah, this is an interesting ragtag crew of characters is forming, and the boundaries of the language barrier are being broken down a little bit. You know, it's a nice touch that he says thank you in Japanese after he's given this new honor. You know, obviously he's learned one or two phrases at this point, but you know, nothing that he can really converse in. I think this type of stuff here, where obviously Toranaga like says repeatedly throughout the episodes about how, you know, knowing who your friends are and who your enemies are. There's a moment in this episode where his son, who's along for this, you know, he's one of his troops, is questioning why he's still working with Yubashige, and he says, well, don't you trust me to like lead a platoon or something? Like, don't, you know, why am I not being trusted? I'm your son. And he says that, well, where are you going to learn that, you know, we're in like this game of friends and enemies and stuff? You know, I can't even remember the exact line, but it was very much this idea that he really kind of, he doesn't just accept the black and the white, and it feels like this exploration of what he's doing with Blackthorn, and that he could be some kind of ally, or at the very least he can learn a lot from him before he's shipped off back home, or whatever it is. But it does feel like some level of respect and some level of friendship is maybe starting to form, you know, some trust, that if nothing else. And again, I'm sure there's going to be moments that test that. There's going to be things that perhaps threaten it at various points, but I think that's what this, it feels to me like in a lot of ways what this story is about, is two people from different cultures ultimately finding some camaraderie and some sense of allegiance with each other through all of the even though there's so many obstacles and why they shouldn't, and how everyone mostly just wants to brand them as a barbarian and move on. Maybe, you know, and perhaps Blackthorn to some extent is a barbarian. Perhaps he is just a pirate at the start of the show, and that part of this is that he's going to become a better person through his interactions with these other characters. So there's an arc there, perhaps, to sort of get from that. Now, I say all this, I've not seen the old show, I've not read the book, I don't know where it's going. I'm just reading what I'm seeing in the episode and just going for it. But I definitely enjoyed this one more than episode 1 or 2. I liked a lot of the ideas that 2 brought in. I think this episode, I'm starting to feel the characters a bit more. Part of that might just be spending more time with them. Part of that is that they're getting a better chance to actually have them interact and sort of bond a little bit and grow. I should also mention that, so the old man who was Hiromatsu, who works with Toranaga, he does stay behind, and he goes to the lords who are having a debate towards the end of the episode, and basically hands in a letter saying that Toranaga is leaving the council. He's not going to be one of these lords anymore. and they're like, we're still going to like take a vote and kill him, right? You know that's going to happen. But the old man's like, but the rules are you need 5 people to take a vote, and now you only have 4. So, you know, he's a little bit cocky in the scene, but it's kind of nice because Ishido looks really upset about it. I almost thought Ishido was just going to grab a sword and try and kill the old man right there and then. And even just a moment like that, it feels like it gives Hiromatsu a little bit of character, where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get a vibe of who some of these characters are now. I feel like I'm getting to know them better. And as a result, I enjoyed this episode more than I did the first. And I liked the first 2. The second episode especially, I thought was really starting to feel like, okay, something's cooking here. This feels like we're starting to bear the fruit a little bit. And I was surprised, actually. I looked up, because I didn't know how many episodes it was. It's 10 episodes. This is a 10-episode show. So we've got 7 whole eps to go. But I thought this flew in, this episode. Well, I thought the pacing in episode 1 especially felt quite sluggish. It was like longer as well. It was like 70 minutes, that first episode. This, I even checked what the runtime was. I assume it was an hour. But either way, it did fly in for me. I had no pacing issues with this one. So, cool stuff. I suppose I should also mention just briefly the character of Fuji, who is the woman from the first 2 episodes. It was her husband who like kind of spoke up and got into trouble for kind of like speaking out and on behalf of Toranaga. So he offered to like commit seppuku and also his child, so his family line would be ended. And Fuji is his wife, right? And is now... She gets like the 2 boxes of the ashes in this episode, and she's obviously desolate, right? She was very upset in the last episodes. Mariko's 1 or 2 big scenes in the first episode were about consoling this woman and trying to help her through it. So I'm not sure where we're going with her directly. It feels like she could be... I don't know if she's going to find some peace over the course of this story, or if she is going to be this tragic character who does something really, really bad later. Not in a villainous way necessarily, but that she does something that's going to affect the story because she has went through this great loss. And like, what's the purpose of this? Why did her son have to die? Because her husband did something that didn't even warrant his death, never mind the death of his son. I wonder if that's something we're going to address, because we are keeping that character around. She came with them on this trip. She's still there, and I'm curious what we're going to be doing with Fuji. But yeah, that's my thoughts on episode 3 of Shogun. I'm looking forward to next week. Let me know what you thought of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe. Things help out a lot. More people will find the channel if you do those things. It's free, it's easy. Please do. If you want to go a little bit further, though, you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you can support us over there for as little as $3 per month and help keep the lights on and all the content coming. So thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?